Hello, everyone. My name is Ezra, otherwise known as E Soup. Um, Today we are reading chapters 63 to 66. And there is a link to trigger warnings in the description if you need it. Um, I definitely want to put that reminder in after last time's stream because we got into some intense stuff that last chapter. So, yeah, how is everybody doing? I'm really curious where the story is going from here. We definitely left off at a very interesting point. Good to see everybody here. Oh, thank you. I keep forgetting about that. I do need the microphone. I don't know why I forget that I need a microphone. Were you able to hear that? Anything I just said? Because I think you can hear me. It just sounds terrible. But I just want to make sure. Hi, Lonjade. I'm just like, yeah, it's fine. I don't need a microphone by my face. Okay, that's good. At least you heard me. Yeah, I'm as always, I'm very excited for these streams. I get a little bit ahead of myself sometimes. Um Elsie, the vid started in the middle of the trigger warning sentence. I was just introducing myself and saying we're gonna read chapters 63 to 66 today. And so this stream might actually be 2 hours and not like 2 hours and change. Because it's like a slightly shorter page count today than some of them have been. But we'll see how that goes. um Oh, Anna, you're finally on time after missing 2 consecutive streams. I'm so glad you're able to make it. Yeah, it's nice to be able to go back and listen when you've missed one, but it's really fun to be able to be in there in the chat while it's happening for sure. So I'm trying to remember where exactly did we leave off? Oh, that's right. We left off right when Xiao Chiye was saving Shi Hongshuan, but he like almost didn't save him and he kind of threatened him, but there were people around, so he couldn't really actually not save him. That was a fun moment. Yeah, so I think that Shi Hongshuan and the Emperor are going to survive, I guess. I don't know. I'm doubtful about Shi Hongshuan because it sounded like he was injured so badly. And yeah, I'm wondering how he's going to recover from that. So we are going to find out. We are on page 261 for chapter 63, which is called Dredging the Ditches, which they should have done so long ago, and they're finally doing. Sorry, I just looked at Henry. Yeah, bro's spine was cracked in half like a cracker. Yes, it kind of was. It sounded like he was bent in a way that you're not supposed to bend. Shi Hongshuan shook as he... Oh god, okay. That's a first sentence of a chapter. Shi Hongshuan shook as he puked up sewage, his face terrifyingly pale. Behind them, Han Jin saw that something wasn't right and hastily waded over. Xiao Qiye let go and watched as Shi Hongxuan was carried to safety. As the rain drummed down, the watching officials sobbed as they chased Li Jianheng's sedan and swarmed toward the palace gates. Pan Qiangjie ran until his shoes fell off. The old man lifted the hem of his robe, panting and heaving, yet not forgetting every few strides to cry out, "Your Majesty!" The crowd around him was in a similar state. Only Hai Liangyi remained as dignified as ever as he kept pace with the sedan all the way back to the palace. The waiting imperial physicians rushed over to meet them, and the chaotic procession continued into the inner palace, where Mu Ru, plainly dressed in white, ran out to receive them. When she saw Li Jianheng covered in blood, her tears flowed without cease. The Empress Dowager, too, came out with Hua Xiangyi at her arm. She turned to Han Cheng, instantly hostile. "I understand you're anxious, but how could you allow the elder officials to run all this way? They're advanced in age, and now they've been soaked in the rain. It will make matters that much worse if anything happens to them." The embroidered uniform guard knelt before her with a rustle of wet cloth. "This humble subject has erred," Han Cheng said. "Quick, prepare soup and distribute dry clothes." The Empress Dowager next addressed the ministers. "It touches me to see everyone's sincere loyalty. His Majesty is safely back in the palace. There's no need for any rush. It's so cold out. Everyone, please head to the adjoining hall to get out of the wind and have a bowl of hot soup. We cannot afford anyone to fall ill at this juncture." The officials kowtowed in gratitude. The Empress Dowager continued. "Grand Secretary Hai and everyone in the Grand Secretariat, as well as the excellencies of the various ministries, please step this way for a word." Blue turnips, a glow stick. It's fine, he'll just shine in the dark. You're just gonna pretend that, that the puke was fluorescent. Oh, Lord. Also, every time, the Empress Dowager is mentioned or mentions something in the context of food, I become suspicious. Because I'm so suspicious that she's poisoning the Emperor or trying to poison someone. So it just immediately, like, my guard is up. Ten Yu wasn't among those summoned. He had remained on Donglong Street to help dredge the public sewers with Xiao Qiye. Yu Xiaozai, the lowly censor from the Chief Surveillance Bureau, followed carrying Ten Yu's straw cloak. Xiao Qiye's hair and face were thoroughly drenched. Everyone on the street shivered in the chilly wind, yet he wasn't affected at all. When they were digging the two men out earlier, he had lifted a beam weighing nearly 100 caddies by himself. At present, he was wrapping a handkerchief around the web between his thumb and index finger with a grim expression. The low-lying districts are full of poor households. To even afford a house of shoddy lumber is a victory for them. When they heard the houses must be demolished, 9 out of 10 refused. With his bare feet still underwater, Ten Yu lifted the hem of his soaked official's robe and tucked it into his belt. Today, Donglong Street was the only street flooded because it runs along the Kailing River. But if this rain doesn't stop, Supreme Commander, by tomorrow the other streets will be the same. If the Imperial Court is willing to offer a subsidy of 5 taels of silver to each household, they will be willing, Tan Tai Hu said, covered in mud to the waist. They just want a roof over their heads. As long as we fork out the money, it won't be a problem. This humble subject feels that those protesting loudest are actually the large manors. Many of those residences violated regulations by expanding their property into the public ditches, and there are plenty of cases where they've come to blows over a few inches of space. Now that we're telling them to tear their walls down, there's no way 5 taels of silver will convince them to wreck their perfectly good homes. They won't even come to the door when we knock. I'm afraid it won't be easy to come to an agreement regarding any subsidy. Senyu had served in the court for a long time. He was all too familiar with these ins and outs of politics. It was only because of Grand Secretary Hai that the Ministry of Revenue was willing to shell out for aid relief to the flood victims here. That sum still has to be accounted for. They'll never agree to pay 5 taels to each household as well. Your Excellency, excuse an uncouth fellow like me for griping, but how can you still be thinking about money now? Tantaihu's chest heaved. Once the water rises and people start dying, the city will become a breeding ground for disease. At that point, even a hoard of silver would be useless. Well now, don't get so worked up. Yu Xiaozai raised his hands placatingly. You're not familiar with the Treasury's constraints. The Ministry of Revenue has its own difficulties. It's not that they begrudge this amount of money. The annual review nears. Why wouldn't they want to resolve this business as neatly as possible? Averting potential disaster will make them look good too. They should be only too happy to sign off on it. So what's stopping them? They're embarrassingly short of cash. Let's say they take the sum of money out now to deal with the emergency. In the coming days, we will enter the spring plowing season. Several regions were struck by natural disasters last year. In those places, there was no harvest at all. After the local governments send in their reports, the Ministry of Revenue must deliberate over the allocation of money so the affected prefectural yamen or provincial administration commissioners can buy seed from neighboring provinces with good harvests. This is a major undertaking concerning the sustenance and survival of hundreds of thousands of people. How could they dare touch the remaining money in the state treasury? The censor continued. Since these people expanded their properties illegally, by law, they should be punished for illegal appropriation of the public ditches. Now, instead of punishing them, you want the court to hand them money. If the Ministry of Revenue doesn't think this through, they'll be indicted by our Chief Surveillance Bureau in the future. Really, everyone is in a tight spot. Yu Xiaozai had an uncanny ability to calm people. When those lightly accented syllables left his mouth, one felt even the most major issues could wait. Every word he spoke was the truth. He took no sides, but laid out the problem precisely as he saw it. The success of the spring planting season in the various regions determined the Empire's course of action in this year. The army provisions of 2 major strategic frontier lands relied on the harvests of Juexi's 13 cities and Hezhou's shipping routes. No one dared be careless. This matter took precedence over everything else. But where did that leave them? Going ahead with the demolition by force would rouse public wrath. Half the men in the Imperial Army hailed from military households in Chudu. There weren't many who lived on Donglong Street, but there were some. When Hai Liangyi entrusted this matter to the Imperial Army, he was effectively entrusting it to Xiao Chuya. Had it been handed to the 8 great battalions, there would be no consideration or compromise. Han Jin would level everything. No one could overlook the potential risk of such brash action. Hai Liangyi had meant for Xiao Chuya to think of a solution. Xiao Chiye pulled the handkerchief tighter around his hand. As he opened his mouth to speak, he saw a man walking toward them through the rain. Shen Zichuan cupped his hands in greeting. I guessed everyone would be here. Any progress on the public ditches? It's a problem, Chen Yu sighed gustily. We can't just tear the houses down. As I understand it, the difficulty for the Ministry of Revenue is that they can't predict the expenses for the upcoming spring planting. Although Shen Zichuan looked calm, his cheeks were flushed. He looked out into the rain. This expenditure can be estimated. This humble one has seen the embroidered uniform guard's archives, so I have some insights. Supreme Commander, if I may. Xiao Chiye pinned his gaze on him. Please go ahead, Judge Shen. Shen Zichuan took a moment to gather his thoughts. Last year, when the new emperor ascended the throne, a general amnesty was granted across the empire. As part of this, Jueshi got a 3/10 exemption on their taxes. They had a bumper crop last year. Other than Huaizhou and Dunzhou, which both reported impact from disasters, the rest of the regions brought in their harvest as usual. Supreme Commander, Dunzhou's granaries truly are hard-pressed this year. The prefectural Yemen will need to buy seed from Suzhou, whose granaries are filled to the brim. But there were heavy storms at the start of the year, and the snow in Zhongbo crushed many houses. Did not the heir of Li Bei set aside 40,000 taels from Li Bei's military budget this year to relieve Suzhou? Have Suzhou repay this favor now. Ask the heir to send a letter to Suzhou's prefectural prefect, Zhou Gui, telling him to discount the grains sold to Dunzhou by 40,000 taels. The Ministry of Revenue can allocate fewer funds to Suzhou, and instead put that money toward house demolition subsidies. Yu Xiaozai pondered it. But at the end of the day, appropriating public ditches is still a crime. Can the Ministry of Revenue stand behind this decision? The illegal appropriation of public ditches should indeed be punished under the law. But these are special circumstances. We can't apply the same rigid rules to a situation every time. Shen Zichuan paused. The imperial court pities the disaster victims. This subsidy is a kindness, an act of imperial magnanimity. Censor Sen is the most appropriate person to step forward and raise this matter. The Ministry of Revenue isn't heartless. As long as it's justifiable, the accounting is clear, and the reserve is sufficient, they'll surely proceed without delay. The annual review was just around the corner, and the evaluations that came of it were integral to the promotion of all positions within the various bureaus. Everyone would be more than happy to be graded as outstanding. So long as it was reasonable, they would certainly be willing. Returning to Suzhou, Shen Zichuan looked to Xiao Chiye. Zhongbo wants to rebuild the city this year. Although we still don't know who will be assigned to the role, it will require a great expense of manpower. The Supreme Commander will owe Suzhou a favor after this. When it comes time to rebuild the city, the manpower can come from those whose houses were demolished today. Let them send people from their households to Suzhou to provide manual labor, escorted by the Imperial Army. It shouldn't take them more than a month. This can be considered their punishment for illegally appropriating the public ditches. These 5 taels of silver will not end up owed or overdue. The ones issuing them, and the ones receiving them, can do so with peace of mind. I don't always 100% understand the politics on first reading, but I'm just like, damn, snaps to Shen Zichuan. What was more, Suzhou would cease to be indebted to Li Bei and instead enter a relationship of mutual assistance. As long as Zhou Gui wasn't a fool, he would understand it as an opportunity to make friends. As Shen Zichuan finished, Yu Xiaozai shook open the straw cloak and draped it over Chen Yu, who didn't waste a moment. He strode forward and laid a heavy hand on Shen Zichuan's shoulder. Judge Shen, time is pressing, so I'll be brief. Once this is over, I, Chen Shunyi, will prepare a simple meal in my abode and respectfully await your visit. He donned his bamboo hat and left with Yu Xiaozai. How's everything in the palace? Xiao Chiye took hold of Shen Zichuan's wrist. Tantai Hu looked as if he wanted to speak, but pressed his lips shut. Shen Zichuan lifted the authority token hanging from Xiao Chia's waist and looked at it for a moment. The Empress Dowager has summoned the ministers of the various bureaus to take them to task. It's just as well you aren't among them. The public ditches must be dredged as soon as possible. Everyone was being courteous earlier, but you have to understand that if you don't unclog the ditches in the next few days, you'll be called to account. The two of them stood there together. It was inappropriate for Xiao Chiye to touch Shen Zichuan more than this. But seeing the unhealthy color on Shen Zichuan's cheeks after standing in the rain, he couldn't help but say, "The Secretariat Elder told you to keep watch in the palace, so go. Sit in the office and drink a cup of hot tea. All you have to do is keep your eyes on the door." That's Han Cheng's job. Shen Zichuan looked down the street. Shifu is still in the temple. It makes me worry. There's no time. Do what you need to do. I'll have to go with the men from the Ministry of Revenue and handle disaster relief for the victims. Xiao Chiye wanted to say more, but Han Jin was calling him, shoes in hand. He could only let go. He backed up a few steps, then turned and left with Tantai Hu and Chen Yang close behind. Shen Zichuan had a splitting headache, though the pouring rain had cleared his mind some. He turned around to call Ge Qingqing, and they took some men down to the districts on lower ground. Clearing the public ditches was a monumental task. The work was dirty and exhausting. The men from the Ministry of Revenue had to change their shoes and lift their hems when they waded into the water, and anyone with a title was taking refuge under a tent, refusing to go near it. In any case, this was a task Hai Liangyi had given the Ministry of Works and the Imperial Army. They were here merely to assist. When Shen Zichuan arrived, he saw there were just a handful of men working. Many of the old-timers in the Ministry of Revenue were used to putting in no more than a token effort. These men were cunning. Unless they had something to gain, orders would fall on deaf ears. "It's about to be dark soon," Ge Qingqing observed. "Why are there so few people here?" An official bowed his way over to Shen Zichuan and, fawning, invited him to sit. They didn't want to come. The Imperial Army hasn't finished digging out the ditches, have they? Let them finish up tonight, and we can recruit more people in the morning. Your Excellency, come sit down. Look how soaked you are. Have a cup of hot tea. At least warm up. You'll freeze out here. Shen Zichuan didn't budge. He peered into the makeshift tent and smiled. "Did you set this up yourself? Well done." The official held out the tea and grinned from ear to ear. "I sure did. Everyone's been so busy. Who would have time to think about us? It was all we could do to build it ourselves." His voice trailed off as the members of the embroidered uniform guard standing solemnly behind Shen Zichuan watched him without a single smile. Shen Zichuan himself showed little emotion. He accepted the tea and took a sip. The official sidled closer. "This is fine tea from Hezhou, specially steeped for your excellency." With a flick of his wrist, Shen Zichuan splashed the tea over the official's face. The man yelped in shock and staggered back several steps. Shen Zichuan flipped the teacup over and tapped the bottom with his fingertips, emptying it of tea leaves. The smile on his face was even more bewitching amid the downpour. "This tea," Shen Zichuan said pleasantly, "was a toast from me to you. Why didn't you drink it?" The official, flustered, hastily wiped the tea off his face. It was too quick. "When the king of hell calls for you, it won't do for you to dawdle." Throwing the teacup aside, Shen Zichuan said, "The Grand Secretary gave strict orders to the embroidered uniform guard to supervise disaster relief efforts. Perhaps the threat of immediate execution hanging around your neck isn't as tight as it should be. The tea is now on the ground, but it's still up to you to drink it. If you couldn't receive it while standing, why don't I send you on your way so you can finish it 6 feet under?" The official dropped to his knees in a panic. Your Excellency, how can you say these things? This humble subordinate is a 6th-rank official of the Imperial Court. How could I be? Think who you're speaking to. The Imperial Prison has no officers below the 4th rank. Ge Qingqing lifted the hem of his robe to kick the official into the water. "If the judge orders you to drink, then drink you must. You're welcome to consider whether you'd like to drink it alive or dead." The official tumbled into the sludge. As Shen Zichuan stared down at him with his hand on his blade, he cupped the water in his palms and scooped it into his mouth, crying out, "I'll drink it. I'll drink it." The men around them who had been lounging where they sat, jesting and lazing about together, all quietly stood and filed into orderly ranks. Shen Zichuan swept a glance across them. "Can we begin clearing the ditches immediately?" "We are at Judge Shen's disposal," they chanted as one. "I'm a mere supervisor. What would I know of the details of this work?" Shen Zichuan fished out a blue handkerchief to wipe his hands and said with a smile, "I wouldn't dream of putting you at my disposal. The embroidered uniform guard will follow your lead, gentlemen. Shall we?" Who would dare remain behind? The official kneeling in the muddy water trembled as he tried to climb up. When Shen Zichuan glanced at him, he bowed his head and stammered, Your Excellency." That's a good question. I was just wondering, too. Was Xiao Chiya's handkerchief blue? I don't know if we know that. I would love if it was his handkerchief. "There's an entire street of water here," Shen Zichuan said soothingly before leaving. "Make sure to finish before you join us." Night had descended, but the rain showed no signs of stopping. No matter how imposing the embroidered uniform guard might be, they still had to trudge through the water to do their work, soaking until they reeked all over. When Shen Zichuan next straightened up, the world spun around him. He braced his hand on a plank at the side of the ditch and steadied himself for a moment, unnoticed in the commotion. Ge Qingqing whispered, "It's no use rushing now. Rest a moment." Shen Zichuan forced a smile as Ge Qingqing walked away. He felt he mustn't open his mouth. He could already taste the bile in his throat. Pushing himself up from the plank, he bent to feel around for his water skin under the partially collapsed building. Suddenly, there was a weight on his back as something dropped over Shen Zichuan's head. The fabric covering him lifted to admit Xiao Qiye, who was panting as he burrowed his way in, shoving a still-warm food box into Shen Zichuan's hands. In the next moment, he burrowed his way out and made to leave. Shen Zichuan pulled aside the overcoat draped over his head. Xiao Qiye, who had already taken a few steps away, turned back. Stepping over the collapsed debris, he crouched to cup Shen Zichuan's face in his palms and kiss him hard. He pulled back and rubbed Shen Zichuan's cheeks vigorously. The rain crashed down around them. Xiao Qiye was breathing heavily. Wordlessly, he looked at Shen Zichuan in the darkness for a split second, then turned and ran off. He leaped over all the obstacles on the ground with a stunning agility as he put back on the dirty, wet robe hanging over the crook of his arm and sped off into the alley. If time weren't so tight. Xiao Qiye tugged at his collar as he made his way across the wreckage. Stepping on filth as he hurried toward the Imperial army, he cursed, "Damn it." That's the end of the chapter. Can we take a moment to appreciate this art? Wow. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's everything. Oh my gosh. What an end of a chapter. So we are on page 275 for chapter 64, which is called Downpour. The overcoat was too big. It slid down Shen Zichuan's shoulders. He tugged it back up. Warmth enveloped him as his nose was filled with Xiao Qiye's scent. Shen Zichuan fished out the handkerchief to wipe his cheeks, damp from Xiao Qiye's hands. On this dark night, with the sound of rain falling all around, he couldn't help but sniff that handkerchief again. That, too, smelled like Xiao Qiye. I think we know whose handkerchief that was. Shen Zichuan lowered his eyes for a moment and nuzzled the tip of his nose against the handkerchief as the gloom on his brow dissipated. The top layer of the meal box was filled with steamed twisted rolls, while the bottom contained hot medicinal soup. Steam rose the instant he lifted the lid. Getting one's hands on a hot meal on a night like this was no easy feat. Even Xiao Qiye would have had to run like mad to make his way here before it got cold, only to go sprinting back again. Ge Jingqing had thought to find a cup of tea for Shen Zichuan. When he climbed up from the ditch and saw him drinking the medicine, he first looked astonished, then glad. "Ah, it's been arranged. That's great. I was just thinking of sending someone to buy a bowl of medicine." Shen Zichuan finished and wiped the corner of his lips with his fingers. How much of this street has been torn down? Just past Ohua Pavilion. It's hard to clear out the areas where the collapse is severe. Ge Qingqing rolled up his sleeves. There's something fishy about all this. Yet another inexplicable event. Shen Zichuan sat up and put his thoughts in order. Only His Majesty himself knows who smuggled him out of the palace. If he refuses to speak, then this case is a dead end. If you ask me, that collapse was no coincidence. Donglong Street floods every year, Yet only Ohua Pavilion happened to collapse last night. Ge Qingqing gazed out into the rain, then looked back at Shen Zichuan. Any ideas? Shen Zichuan had been thinking about it since morning. The collapse would have wiped away any traces in Ohua Pavilion. But this was certainly no coincidence either. Shi Hongshuan was a man who treasured his life. He had just renovated Ohua Pavilion, and those who knew the details of the hollowed-out stage's construction were few and far between. Shen Zichuan watched the rain. He murmured, as if to himself, "No need to fret. Whoever's behind it is bound to make another move. We still don't know who the target was this time." So, either it was Shen Zichuan targeting Shi Hongshuan, or was it someone targeting the Emperor? Was it the Empress Dowager? Because I was squarely thinking, like, oh, it's Shen Zichuan, but now I have questions. It's still so funny that Shi Hongshuan got his spine cracked on his own bad building idea. I know, Henry. For real. The imperial physician retreated from the emperor's bedchamber and bowed to the Empress Dowager and the assembled ministers. From behind the curtain, the Empress Dowager leaned forward to listen to the imperial physician's detailed report of Li Jianheng's condition. When she heard the bleeding had stopped, she breathed a sigh of relief. This matter is bizarre. The Empress Dowager straightened in her seat. To think not a single person knew the Son of Heaven had left the palace. How can anyone sleep soundly if this is the state of our patrols in the heart of our capital? None of the old ministers uttered a word. All hung their heads in silence like clay sculptures. From my place in the imperial harem, the Empress Dowager continued, I shouldn't be intervening in governmental affairs, but this, once again, concerns His Majesty's safety. A mother cannot help but worry. I watched this with my hair turning gray and tears running dry. There's a footnote. This is from the poem Bidding Farewell to My Old Mother by Huang Jingren. How can I take another scare like this? My ministers, I am owed an explanation. On hearing this, Pan Xiangjie's heart jumped in his chest. After a moment of silence, Kong Qiu spoke. The patrols in the inner palace might not necessarily have been able to stop His Majesty, even if they wanted to. In this subject's opinion, Shi Hongshuan should be punished most severely. If he hadn't used those temptresses from foreign lands to lure His Majesty, then why would His Majesty have left the palace? That's right. The Minister of Revenue, Wei Huaigu, was the lawful elder brother of the Wei Huaixing, who had so recently targeted Xiao Chiye. Wei Huaigu was head of the Wei clan. He wasn't usually in the habit of speaking out, but this time he lifted his head. Shi Hongshuan deserves to be punished, but his crime does not deserve death. This subject feels that the fault lies with the Ministry of Works. Are they not the ones in charge of repairs to the public works in Chudu? Minister Pan, how could you allow the public ditches to grow so clogged? When he saw Wei Huaigu was about to shift the blame, Pan Xiangjie fell to his knees and beseeched the Empress Dowager. I ask that your majesties discern the truth of this matter and render fair judgment. The Ministry of Works notified the Ministry of Revenue of the blockage of the public ditches as far back as the reign of the Xiande Emperor, and requested they allocate money for us to carry out repairs. But the Ministry of Revenue delayed the approval of these funds again and again. What could the Ministry of Works do? This is no minor repair. Wei Huaigu was unfazed. This man was a tougher nut to crack than his brother Wei Huaxing. Any release of funds by the Ministry of Revenue must go through the Grand Secretariat. Without Secretariat Elder Hua's say-so, who would dare approve this spending? Besides, Chu Du was cleaning up the mess that is the 6 prefectures of Zhongbo in those years. The treasury was nearly emptied. Of course we'd have liked to help, but we didn't have the means. Everyone has their difficulties, Pan Xiangjie fired back. Why are you targeting only the Ministry of Works? The left censor-in-chief, Chen Xunyi, wants to indict the Ministry of Works for negligence in irrigation works. He's saying we failed to secure the embankment of the Kailing River. But did it collapse today? No. This is proof. The Ministry of Works has never cut corners in our projects. We work diligently. Had we the money, we would have cleared the public ditches long ago. Neither the Ministry of Revenue nor the Ministry of Works was willing to shoulder the blame. Wei Huaigu and Pan Xiangjie were both elders of the 8 great clans. Neither would take a step back. They stood their ground and passed the buck back and forth. Kong Qiu held back a sneer. He came from a humble background. Hai Liangyi himself had elevated him to his current position. He could work with these ministers from the noble clans, but he would never be of the same mind as them. Watching them kicking the blame around irked him to no end. The Ministry of Works had reported the matter of the ditches before. This was true. But who had reported it? Some subordinate, a minor official who worked in back offices and had never set foot in court. If Pan Xiangjie had recognized the severity of the problem, he would have taken it up with the Ministry of Revenue himself. But he hadn't done so. As for the Ministry of Revenue, they had clearly known of the issue. But what was the relationship between Wei Huaigu and Hua Siqian? These 2 clans were intermarried just like the rest of the 8 great clans. Though they hadn't seemed to be on close terms in recent years, old ties remained. Wei Huaigu was far more resourceful than Wei Huaxing. He was someone who could discuss political affairs with Hua Siqian on equal footing. But he had never brought this matter up. Everyone involved had muddled their way through. If they drowned in these political seas, then they deserved it. One could only blame their rotten luck. Sitting behind the curtain, the Empress Dowager saw through every one of these men. Hua Xiangyi stood behind her, listening with rapt attention. At last, Hai Liangyi coughed a few times. Covering his mouth with a handkerchief, he said, "There was indeed mention of this matter in the Grand Secretariat's reports, but it appeared only once, and no one followed up after that. Now that a building has collapsed, everyone remembers it. But is this the first time the water level has risen? Let's not bicker over what happened long ago. Did the water level rise in the spring of last year and the year before? Did the Ministry of Works report it then?" Pan Xiangjie turned away, voice filled with remorse. When the Grand Secretary puts it that way, the Ministry of Works has indeed been negligent, but we really had no choice. What's important now is to dredge the ditches without delay. "That's right. The situation is critical," Wei Huaigu said. "The Ministry of Revenue has allocated money to the disaster victims. Appropriation of blame can wait until the public ditches have been cleared. Who's digging now? Is it the 8 great battalions?" It was the Minister of War, Chen Zhen, who replied. "The Imperial Army is doing it. Supreme Commander Xiao is soaking in the water as we speak." Before the Empress Dowager could respond, a palace maid rushed out from the inner room and fell to her knees. "Your Majesty, His Majesty's back is covered in rashes." The Empress Dowager jolted to her feet. What? Hai Liangyi doubled over and began coughing violently. Hua Xiangyi took the Empress Dowager's arm to support her and promptly made a decision. Summon the imperial physicians and hold the Secretariat Elder steady, quickly. Shi Hongxuan, too, had broken out in a rash. A military medic of the 8th grade battalions was first to discover it. He promptly grabbed the hem of his robe and raced out to report to Han Jin. Han Jin wiped his face, dumbfounded. Isn't it just a rash? Just get him warmed up, and he'll be fine. It's not. The medic was so anxious he stomped his foot. How can that be just a rash? It's an infectious disease. Han Jin froze. The surrounding men of the 8th grade battalions, still up to their knees in the water, had all gone pale. Han Jin turned and saw the Imperial army bustling about a short distance away. He sloshed through the flood to them and grabbed Chen Yang, yelling, "Where is the Supreme Commander? Call him over now. It's an emergency." Xiao Chiye pushed a broken plank aside and waded over. What is it? Han Jin smeared his dirty, shaking hands on his clothes. We have to stop the demolition, and we can't stand around in this water anymore. Supreme Commander, an epidemic has broken out. There was a cold glint in Xiao Chiye's eye. Who caught it? Shi Hongxuan. Han Jin's breathing was panicked. Then, is His Majesty. Gu Jin, Xiao Chiye called out. Run to the palace and report this matter to Secretariat Elder Hai. Immediately. Gu Jin climbed up the embankment and sped off. Within a few steps, he had somersaulted onto the rooftop and stepped across the ridge of the roof to leap his way to the palace gates. Take me to Shi Hongxuan, said Xiao Chiye steadily. Now. Shi Hongxuan was delirious with fever. The medicine that had just been applied to his crushed legs was already damp with sweat. He lay on the bed, incoherent. The medic dabbed sweat from his own brow and explained, 4 hours ago, he looked as if he had caught a chill. I gave him medicine, and his fever subsided. But when I examined him just now, his fever had gotten much worse. When I changed the poultices on his legs, he was entirely covered in these rashes. Xiao Chiye looked at the red welts. Are you sure it's contagious? During the years of Yongyi, a pox like this broke out in the city of Dancheng, the medic explained. It was reported to the Court of Imperial Physicians. They'll have records of it on file. Supreme Commander, once this rash spreads over the body, the patient will run a high fever. In another 4 hours, they'll fall unconscious and vomit continuously. I'm afraid some of the people displaced by the flood might already be sick. The Temple of Guilt must arrange for the decoction of the appropriate herbs before it spreads further. Now truly afraid, Han Jin asked, what caused this? If we don't know how he got it, how can we continue draining this ditch? We're arriving at the spring thaw, the medic said. It's damp and cold, and the low-lying district has been gathering sewage and filth all year. Their houses are clustered together, so cramped most don't even have windows. Lack of sunlight will make people prone to illness. But if that's the case, how did Shi Hongxuan get infected? Xiao Chiye furrowed his brow. Ohua Pavilion is on high ground, and servants clean the connected alleys behind it. There's no contact with any filth. Did he get infected just because he soaked in the swill water for a few hours during the collapse? The medic hesitated. He wiped his sweat again and mustered the courage to say, I'll be honest with you, Supreme Commander. I suspect he didn't contract this illness after the cave-in, but from fooling around in the brothel before then. But if second young Master Shi is already burning up, then His Majesty... Supreme Commander, Meng Rui lifted the curtain and entered, face grave. More than 10 people have collapsed in the Temple of Guilt. 2 men here from the Ministry of Revenue have also collapsed. Xiao Chiye was preparing to issue new commands when Chen Yong charged in next, bringing a gust of rainwater with him. Master, Lao Hu is down with the fever. The sound of the rain outside grew suddenly urgent. Like battle drums pounding on all sides, it poured down with a vengeance, determined to shatter this pitch-black night. Xiao Chiye dashed out into the downpour. It'll be too late if we wait for approval. Go. Fetch herbs from all the apothecaries on Shenwu Street. Take anyone who's weak, anyone with a cold, fever, or vomiting, to the Temple of Guilt, and evacuate everyone who's healthy. Those on duty from the Ministry of Revenue must start decocting herbs immediately. Ding Tao. Gongzi, Ding Tao answered. Xiao Chiye dragged Ding Tao over, chest heaving as he ordered in a hushed tone. Tell Shen Lanzhou to get out of there now. That's the end of the chapter. Henry, I think you might be right. Actually, never mind. They're definitely trying to blame courtesans for their own negligence with the sewage, aren't they? I do think it's probably a sewage-related illness and not, like, syphilis or something. But they are, you know, they don't know for sure. But with the amount of people now coming down with this illness, it seems like it's probably the sewage. Next time I'm sick, I'm messaging my friends, you must start decocting herbs immediately. I love that. It is a good phrase. Oh. Okay. Because they said, like, I suspect he didn't contract this illness after the cave-in, but from fooling around in the brothel before then. That's why I thought they were saying it was sexually transmitted. But, like I said, they're just, speculating, and they don't know. Yeah, Lanzhou is in there. And he doesn't sleep enough, and he's liable to get sick easily. So that's fun. That's great. So I'm gonna take a break now for 5 to 10 minutes. And when we come back, we will be on page 285 for chapter 65, which is called Pox. Henry, at least the plague arc comes free with a sick fic. I like that you emphasize that. You had to say it twice, because we need there to be a sick fic. Yes, I'm manifesting it too. I'm manifesting that he will be fine. Yep. I'm sure this will have no long-term consequences for his health. I sure hope so. I hope he doesn't get the pox. I hope that's just referring to the general existence of pox and not Shen Zichuan getting the pox. Yeah, that would be great. But I guess we might find out in 10 minutes. So I will see y'all soon. Hello, I'm back. I see y'all theorizing in the chat. And, same here. Or, I mean, in my head, I'm trying to, at least. Although I often don't really have any ideas. But Elsie, what you said, that's really curious. Shen Zichuan said something super strange when trying to make Shi Hongshu an ally with the other clans. Something like, it doesn't have to be those 8 great clans. Like, he was saying it could be another clan that's powerful, but they're not one of the 8 great clans. I kind of remember him saying something like that. I also don't know what he means by it. Um, but that is definitely interesting. So, we're worried about our boy, Chen Zichuan. Xiao Jiming, too. I want neither of them to get the pox, please. Or if one of them does, like, can it just, not be that big a deal? Please? Can everyone be okay? um, but, I guess we're gonna find out if one of them is getting sick. We are on page 285 for chapter 65, Pox. Rain drummed against the ground, throwing up muddy splashes. People hurried in and out of the Temple of Guilt. Makeshift rain shelters had already been pitched, and the bitter aroma of herbal medicine choked the air. Even the men from the embroidered uniform guard watching the stoves kept their noses and mouths covered with handkerchiefs. Qi Huilian, wrapping a cloth around his head, joined Ji Gong to distribute the medicine. Seeing a feverish, unconscious man mumbling incoherently, he paused and scrutinized him. Ji Gong was clearing away bowls in the courtyard with nimble fingers. When he saw the Grand Mentor stop, he asked, "What's wrong?" "This is the Dan Chung pox." Qi Huilian pulled open the patient's collar. "The rash will spread over his body. Don't get too close. It's contagious." "Can it be treated?" Qi Huilian's scalp itched. He scratched it a few times. "Yes, but not easily. The work on the public ditches must continue. But who knows if anyone infected spat or pissed in the water? If the men digging are infected without realizing and spread it to others, won't it be all over the city soon?" An awful shame. Ji Gong peered at the man beneath the rain shelter. What should be done then? What should be done? Qi Huilian pulled up the cloth to cover more of his face as a fresh wave of people entered. He whispered, "It comes down to fate. But first, someone must reassure the public. There must not be unrest. Then, assemble all the big and small apothecaries in Chudu. Those infected must be strictly quarantined." "We can't stay either." Ji Gong set down the bowl in his hands. "Someone else will take care of all this. I'll tell Chuan Er to leave." "Lanzhou can't leave. He's the one taking care of it. Can you count on Han Chung to step forward and handle this? Those men will be first to hide from what's coming." "No." Ji Gong paled. "Chuan Er's only a 5th rank judge right now. He can't even attend court like those of the 4th rank and above. How can they let him handle it? This is a major crisis. There are plenty of people with more authority and power. Let them take over." "Whom are you trying to reason with?" Qi Huilian set down the bowls he held. "If Han Chung keeps him here in the name of gaining experience, there's nothing you can do about it. Once the pox begins to spread, which high-ranking official would be willing to come here and take charge? Not even Hai Liangyi will come. Besides, Lanzhou can't go now. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. If he handles it well, it's another chance for promotion. Ji Gong shoved him. "What the hell are you saying?" Chi Huilian tumbled to the ground. He climbed back to his feet, temper flaring. If he lets this chance pass, then what's the point of all he's done? This is exactly the time when people trample one another to get ahead. He must seize this opportunity. Don't you understand? I don't care to understand. Jigong flushed with rage. I'm telling him to leave. I have to take him away. Jigong started toward the temple doors, but Xiao Tianya blocked his path. Most of those in the Temple of Guilt are about to be evacuated. Only infected patients remain inside. Shifu shouldn't go in. He smiled. Xiansheng's journals and notes have already been moved to the old residence. Master told me to rent a small house on Shenwu Street for the both of you. It's close to the palace gates, on high ground. There's no way it will flood. Step aside, Jigong cried. The infected are inside, so how can Chuanar stay in there? I need to speak with him. Qiao Tianya was no longer smiling. He said solemnly, Shifu, why put me on the spot? Master has given orders. There's no changing them. Everyone here is infected. Master will only worry if you remain. For the sake of his duty to you as a son, I'm asking you to come with me. Listening to the sounds of coughing all around, Jigong grew only more anxious. He grabbed Qiao Tianya's arm and pushed it aside. Qiao Tianya had anticipated such a move. He readily accepted the attack. Half his arm had gone numb, but his legs were fast as ever as he moved to obstruct Jigong. Shifu, said Qiao Tianya, voice low, calm down. For Master to make such an arrangement, he must have some countermeasure in mind. I need to return for him later. If we leave now, Master can go back earlier too, all right? There are eyes all around. Do you really think you can whisk him away? Where would you go? Qiao Tianya's final question was, at last, what calmed Jigong down. He looked into the interior of the temple for a long time, then flicked his sleeves and pointed a trembling finger at Chi Huilian. In the end, he said not another word. Shen Zichuan sat on a bench behind the privacy of a curtain and closed his eyes to rest. His ears were ringing, and he'd begun to feel dizzy. Yet his face betrayed none of his discomfort. It was only when he heard someone calling him that he opened his eyes. The instant he did, every trace of weariness vanished from his features. It was an official from the Ministry of Revenue. Lord Judge, the supply of herbs is insufficient. What will we do tomorrow? This is a matter of grave importance. There will be no break in the supply of medicine. Shen Zichuan gathered the overcoat tighter around himself. The man from the Court of Imperial Physicians ought to be here soon. He'll have an update on our current supplies. Tell them to continue decocting the medicine. Don't scrimp. The official murmured his acknowledgement. Taking in his panic-stricken expression, Shen Zichuan asked, Which department of the Ministry of Revenue do you work for? This humble subordinate is merely a clerk, a minor official in charge of the records of official documents. However minor one's post, we all work for the people. Shen Zichuan reached up and pinched the space between his brows, composing himself for a moment before continuing. What's your name? This humble subordinate is Liang Cuishan. You'll take over supervision of the distribution of herbs. Record everything in detail, no matter how small, Shen Zichuan said. I'd hazard a guess that the Imperial Army has already gone to secure the medicine since time is so tight. We can't wait for the palace's orders. Any supplies we use, starting today, must be clearly recorded. He paused. Go and rest for now. Keep a close watch on your health, and report it immediately if you feel any discomfort. Liang Cuishan took his leave. The moment the curtain fell,
Shen Zichuan put a palm to his forehead. It was scalding. Ge Qingqing ducked inside. Shocked at the sight, he stepped forward and whispered, "Judge." "When did Shi Hongshuan get the rash?" Shen Zichuan asked evenly. 4 hours after they applied the fever medicine, Ge Qingqing answered. It started spreading upward from his legs. "I got the rash first, before the fever," said Shen Zichuan. His head was still clear. "The symptoms don't match. Mine's probably not the pox. But as a precaution, I should drink that medicine too." Ge Qingqing sighed with relief. "Thank goodness you didn't take leave this morning." The emperor himself was sick. Which imperial physician would dare say he caught it out fooling around in town? They would look for any other explanation. But who could possibly have infected the emperor? If not his personal eunuchs, it would have to be the guards who stood before the throne, including Shen Zichuan. Had he begged illness this morning, it would be leverage against him. If his rash was made out to be the pox, he would forever lose the right to stand before the throne. Shen Zichuan still carried the burden of Shen Wei's crimes on his back. Once he fell, it would be nigh impossible for him to claw his way back up a second time. Shrewd as he was, even he found it hard to breathe at this moment. Schemes and intrigues he could handle. Only Providence was a force that couldn't be reckoned with. Had he been just a little less cautious, he would have fallen into someone else's clutches. His life and death would now be at the mercy of any word against him. Shen Zichuan closed his eyes. Ge Qingqing withdrew. Shen Zichuan listened to the sound of the rain, his thoughts far away. Those murky old memories rose up with the wet pattering. He knit his brows, frustrated and bone-weary. He didn't like snowy days, or rain. Cold and damp reminded him of the Chasha sinkhole, of Jimu, of all the days he had spent on his knees at the mercy of others. Cold and damp made him uneasy, gloomy. They turned him into nothing more than a body, empty of everything but frigid sufferance and irritability. Wrapped in his thoughts, Shen Zichuan leaned against the wall, intending to close his eyes for a moment. But the longer he sat, the drowsier he became, until he genuinely fell asleep in that little corner. It was deep in the night when Xiao Qiye entered the Temple of Guilt with the imperial physician who had hurried over. Behind him, Ding Tao looked miserable. He hadn't managed to find Shen Zichuan. Xiao Qiye strode up to the embroidered uniform guard decocting the medicine. "Where's the judge?" "I'm looking for him." Half his face covered, the guard handed him a bowl of medicine. "It doesn't matter who you're looking for. You have to drink this first. Supreme Commander, your men in the Imperial Army still have to go down into the water. Please be careful." Xiao Qiye gulped down the decoction without a word. The man rose and shouted into the rain shelter. "Qingge! Is Qingge there? Where's our judge? Supreme Commander Xiao is looking for him." Ge Qingqing had been dozing on a bench. At the shout, he swiftly sat up and straightened his clothes before walking over. When he saw Xiao Qiye, he said, "The judge is resting inside. He hasn't slept all night. Please take a rest, too, Supreme Commander." The 8 great battalions said they have to guard the city gates, so we'll be the ones digging the rest of the ditch tomorrow. Physical work naturally must be done by sturdy men, Xiao Qiye remarked as they walked. "Watch the door. Don't let anyone in." He lifted the curtain and ducked inside. No lamp was lit. He glanced around. Only when he took a few more steps into the dark did he see Shen Zichuan resting against the wall. Xiao Qiye was covered in filth. He removed his outer robe, sat beside Shen Zichuan, and poured sewer water out of his boots. It was cold even indoors. He put his boots back on and went out to seek some embers from the temple stove, then came back and started a fire in the copper basin. Shen Zichuan opened his eyes. Are you done digging out Donglong Street? Yeah. Xiao Qiye stoked the fire. Why aren't you sleeping on the bed? I was just resting my eyes, Shen Zichuan said, but once I sat down, I couldn't get up. Xiao Qiye shifted the basin closer to the bed. Come sleep here. I'll wake you up in a bit. Xiao Qiye shifted the basin closer. Oh, I just read that. Shen Zichuan didn't have the energy to feign courtesy. He lay down, and Xiao Qiye gathered him into his arms from behind, pressing his face against Shen Zichuan's hot cheek. At first, Shen Zichuan could hear Xiao Qiye whispering, but that, too, soon became hazy. Only after Xiao Qiye heard Shen Zichuan's breathing grow even, did he reach out to unfasten his collar and take a closer look at that red rash. Not the same as Shi Hongshuan's. Xiao Qiye refastened his clothes and drifted off with Shen Zichuan in his arms. I think we got the sick fic that you wanted, Henry. Blue, hurt comfort, my beloved. He was awakened by a scalding heat. Dazed, he opened his eyes a crack. Once he got a clear look at the man in his embrace, his mind cleared in an instant. Shen Zichuan seemed to be on fire, his temples damp with sweat. Xiao Qiye laid a hand on him and felt Shen Zichuan burning up all over. He swiftly sat up. Lanzhou! Lanzhou! Shen Zichuan's clothes were soaked through. His brows were drawn tightly together, and his breath came in short pants. Roused by Xiao Qiye, he said groggily, quote, Quarantine. You can get infected even if you aren't near the water. Xiao Qiye wrapped him in his overcoat and shouted, Chen Yang, summon the imperial physician. Chen Yang, dozing against the wall outside, jerked awake. He leapt off the steps, made his way under the rain shelter, and dragged the imperial physician inside. The man lifted the overcoat to take a look, then said, Urgent. Supreme Commander, the judge has contracted the pox, though it looks like he caught a cold first. Xiao Qiye grabbed the imperial physician's arm. Staring into his eyes, he asked in a voice cracking with frost, The judge has what? Panicked, the imperial physician corrected himself. He's overworked and overstressed. Of course that's the reason he fell ill. That's right. The judge fell ill here today. Xiao Qiye tightened his grip. He wasn't ill before this. Right, the imperial physician repeated. All the medicine in Chudu is here. I know your excellency has the miraculous hands of a healer. Xiao Qiye softened his tone. You can heal him, right? Under the force of Xiao Qiye's gaze, the imperial physician's knees knocked together. He gripped the edge of the bed for support and nodded hastily. I can. Yes, of course I can. Well, that's the end of the chapter. Your Honor, they are so in love. We're on page 293 for chapter 66, which is called Rain Ceased. I can see that there's art on the next page. No one was allowed in or out of the imperial palace, so the Empress Dowager arranged for Hai Liangyi and the other officials to rest in the Grand Secretariat's compound. Within the palace and without, the capital buzzed with anxiety. The serving eunuchs and palace maids carried out the daily cleaning of Li Jianheng's bedchamber with extra caution, each hand-picked by the Empress Dowager herself. Every time they exited his room, they washed their hands and changed their clothes, and they were confined to the Emperor's outer chambers even during their breaks. Mu Ru kept watch at Li Jianheng's bedside, insisting on taking over his personal care. She taste-tested all his medicine and administered it herself. Even when she ate or slept, she never left Li Jianheng's bedchamber. Li Jianheng drifted in and out of consciousness, keeping the court of imperial physicians on tenterhooks. When they prescribed and decocted medicine, they were scrupulously careful. They knew their lives hung by a thread. An air of dread hung all over them, hung over all. Each man looked as wretched as if he grieved his own parents. Meanwhile, the men of the court of imperial physicians working outside the palace made arrangements for the supply of medicine in Chudu. All healthy disaster victims relocated from the low-lying district were required to take the medicine as a precaution. The Ministry of Revenue, an embroidered uniform guard, assisted with the distribution of aid. They set up a shack outside the Temple of Guilt, where they dispensed medicine and rice porridge each day at set times. Oh, there is art of the Empress Dowager with the Emperor. I'm still, like, suspicious of her and her intentions with the Emperor, but I don't know, like, I don't know exactly how to feel about her at this point, or, like, what she wants for the Emperor. If she would, like, try to kill him, or if she genuinely, like, cares about his life. I really don't know. Henry, why did you say that? At least Xiao Qie is a strong man with a good immune system, and we don't have to worry about him. I feel... I don't know. I feel concerned. He does have a good immune system, but I still feel concerned. You know? Han Jin had withdrawn the 8 great battalions from Donglong Street the night Shi Hongshuan fell ill. On pretext of patrolling the various city gates, the 8 great battalions threw all the responsibility of dredging the public ditches to the Imperial Army. However, half the Imperial Army had been awaiting orders on Mount Feng. Now, they were trapped outside the city. Xiao Qie didn't have that many elite soldiers with him. Fortunately, some men from the Ministry of Works remained down in the city. Together with the dozens of men from the embroidered uniform guard, the group braved the rain to dig through the ditches of the 4 main streets. By the 4th day, everyone was exhausted. Chen Yang, Ge Qingqing, Chao Tianya, and Gu Jin returned from the dredging and fell asleep sitting against the wall. Ding Tao and Xiao Wu were the youngest. The older men took turns straightening their legs for the youngsters to use as pillows as they slept. Why is that so sweet? Ding Tao couldn't even summon the energy to lick the ink out from his brush, so his note-taking came to a halt. It had been but a few days, yet every one of them looked as disheveled and unkempt as a street-side beggar. Xiao Qie scarcely slept. He led the men to dig the ditches before dawn, and there was not a moment to rest throughout the day. At night, when he returned to the Temple of Guilt, he watched over Shen Zichuan. Before, Shen Zichuan had at least been able to remain awake and clear-headed, but now his fever wouldn't recede, and he couldn't stop vomiting. Without food in his stomach, he retched up bile. When he did manage to get down any medicine, he would bring it all back up in the middle of the night. Thus, when Xiao Qiye returned, he would take Shen Zichuan in his arms, face to face, and sit against the wall, so Shen Zichuan could rest his head on Xiao Qiye's chest or shoulder. Each time Shen Zichuan felt nauseous, Xiao Qiye rubbed a soothing hand over his back. In the dead of night, all was quiet. The Temple of Guilt was a deserted island beyond the reach of the everyday world. The rain had ceased, but the birds in the trees were silent as the thick blanket of night shrouded the city. Shen Zichuan's breathing was labored. He coughed violently, his chest heaving with the effort. Xiao Qiye, dozing lightly beneath him, jerked awake. He placed a hand on Shen Zichuan's back and wearily moved his legs to gently rock the man in his arms. "Lanzhou," Xiao Qiye coaxed him. "Where is Lanzhou?" Shen Zichuan looked sickly and wan, moments away from vomiting. He opened his eyes a sliver and replied in a hoarse voice, "Here. That's it. Give it a sway. Rock the illness away." Xiao Qiye said, "When you're recovered, our Gongzi will take you horseback riding." Shen Zichuan laid his head on Xiao Qiye's shoulder and hummed huskily in acknowledgement. "This is actually how you hold a child." Xiao Qiye ran a palm down Shen Zichuan's back. In this close and quiet moment, he whispered, "When I had a rash as a boy, my mother held me this way. What are you going to call me when I'm holding you like this?" Shen Zichuan nuzzled against Xiao Qiye's cheek and buried his face in his neck. After a long moment, he said in a muffled voice, "Call you Daddy." Xiao Qiye's chest rumbled as he chuckled. "Are you touched?" Shen Zichuan coughed. He didn't answer. "When I tamed horses back in Libei, I ate and slept with them," Xiao Qiye said. "Once, when Snowcrest was a foal, we were stranded in heavy rain. We snuggled up just like this to stay warm. He's probably forgotten it." Shen Zichuan listened, drowsy. "Don't you forget," Xiao Qiye said. "If you're touched, you have to remember and repay me in the future." Shen Zichuan's lips parted, but he made no sound. Xiao Qiye extended a finger to brush damp hair from his forehead and lowered his eyes to look at Shen Zichuan's pale profile. "Oh, Lanzhou," he murmured to him in hushed tones. Wrapped in these soft sounds, Shen Zichuan drifted off. He lay, immersed in the agony of his illness, wallowing in torment. But from the bitter depth of his misery, he tasted sweetness. Xiao Qiye was like the blazing sun, like the wind over the grasslands. He stood out from the masses. Under the gloomy pall of rain and snow, Shen Zichuan had slipped that handkerchief into his sleeve. It was like hiding a rousing and passionate dream. In his dream, he felt the wild galloping of horses over 1,000 li of grasslands, and the spreading of wings that soared across 10,000 li of clear skies. They blurred and morphed into an indescribable sight, a vision he would be hard-pressed to recount in detail. This man was a kind of temptation unto himself. Every O Lanzhou was laced with an affection as deep as the sea. His casual frivolity and quiet steadfastness blended into a perfect contradiction. The words he whispered to Shen Zichuan were outrageous, yet the arms in which he cradled him were dependable beyond compare. Shen Zichuan was powerless to resist. Those deep yet careless kisses had deceived him into dropping his guard, had turned him into a villain on intimate terms with Xiao Chie. Now, made helpless by illness, he had grown muddle-headed enough to rely on him. His vomiting subsided a short while later. Xiao Chie fed him medicine, spoon by spoon. Each time Shen Zichuan showed signs of drifting off again, Xiao Chie would murmur, "Where is Lanzhou?" The words seemed to have an inexplicable power. Time and time again, Shen Zichuan came back. Oh my god. You know, I didn't think we were gonna get, like, this level of sweetness yet at this point in the story. For some reason, I thought that it was gonna be a little bit longer before that happened. But here we are. Oh no, Blue. I also feel like Where is Lanzhou is going to wreck us in the future. I'm scared. I'm scared now. At first, Xiao Chie had slept himself as he held Shen Zichuan at night. But after several people in the Temple of Guilt died one after another in the days that followed the flood, he no longer dared sleep as he listened to Shen Zichuan gasp for breath. On the 9th day, 2 more people died under the rain shelter. The Imperial Army and Embroidered Uniform Guard couldn't leave the bodies lying around, but neither could they bury them there. Xiao Chie left it to Ge Qingqing to make arrangements. When Ge Qingqing led the men to carry out the corpses, Chao Tianya was squatting by the stove. Squatting by the stove, fanning the fire. As he watched the medicine brewing, he turned something over in his mind. Xiao Wu approached them. "The Supreme Commander is waiting for the medicine. Is it ready?" "The public ditches have been cleared. There's no hurry today. Tell the Supreme Commander to wait." Chao Tianya added some firewood and shifted the handkerchief covering his mouth and nose aside to say, "Keep an eye on the Supreme Commander. He's with my master every day. If he comes down with the pox too, we don't have extra medicine for him." There was a plague in Luoxia Pass during the reign of Yongyi. Apparently, his lordship the prince led his men to handle it then, and he never caught it. Xiao Wu squatted down to wait. "I heard the Guga from Li Bei saying the Xiao clan has a heaven-sent gift. Their physique is stronger than any common man. Tantai Hu is pretty sturdy, too. Didn't he still fall ill just the same? It never hurts to be careful. Have you drunk this morning's medicine?" "Yeah, I did," Xiao Wu answered honestly. Chao Tianya shifted on his slightly numb legs. "How is Tantai Hu today?" "He's been able to keep some food down since yesterday," Xiao Wu reported. "Chen Ge said it's because he's strong, and we caught it in time. He's got enough medicine, and there's an imperial physician checking up on him too. He'll be fine. Until he recovers completely, we can't be too careful." Chao Tianya seemed preoccupied as he tossed the fan to Xiao Wu. "Watch the fire for me. I need to talk to them." He rose and headed toward the rain shelter. Chao Tianya ducked under the curtain. It was dim inside, but not damp. The bedding, crucially, could stay dry, and an attendant from the Court of Imperial Physicians washed and changed the sheets daily. Xiao Chie was already speaking to Tantai Hu, so Chao Tianya waited. Finally, Xiao Chie turned. "What is it?" Chao Tianya lifted the hem of his robe and took a seat on a bench at the side. "I have something urgent to discuss with you." Xiao Chie caressed his thumb ring as he looked at Chao Tianya with calm eyes, waiting for him to speak. The Court of Imperial Physicians and the Embroidered Uniform Guard have records of this disease on file. Have you seen them? Xiao Tianya asked. Xiao Qie nodded. So you know the cause of the outbreak in the city of Dancheng. Xiao, Supreme Commander, Xiao Tianya corrected himself. Before my master fell ill, he checked the Embroidered Uniform Guard's archives, and specifically told me to make note of certain points. I've been thinking about this pox for a few days now, but since he's still sick, I can only discuss this with you. What did Lanzhou say? He said there's something queer about this disease. Xiao Tianya propped his elbows on his knees and whistled to summon Ding Tao. Recite the details of the Dancheng pox to the Supreme Commander. You have an eidetic memory. You remember, right? Ding Tao thought a moment. There was an outbreak in Dancheng in the summer during the reign of Yongyi. The Court of Imperial Physicians sent a delegate with the Embroidered Uniform Guard to learn what they could, and they discovered something strange about the disease. After tracing the course of the pox through the city, they found a burial mound behind the site of the first outbreak. It was ill-kept, with no one assigned to maintain it. The corpses buried there before the start of spring were sodden and rotting. He paused. There was a food stall in service nearby. The weather was hot that summer, and flies were everywhere. The stall keeper was first to fall ill. No one paid it any mind. He himself suspected it to be a cold. He took some medicine and carried on with his business at the stall. And then, oh my, a score of people fell ill after buying his food. That was when the prefectural yeoman of Dancheng realized something was wrong. A burial mound, huh? The imperial physician was packing his case. All kinds of people are thrown there. Perhaps one of them had some disease or was bitten by a wild animal. If the corpse was exposed and rotting, it would have been a feast for the flies. Anyone who gets too close would be at risk of infection. He fastened his case and said, "It wasn't easy for anyone back then. Dancheng was sealed off for half a year, and a great number of people died. We're lucky we caught it this time before it could spread, and we have experience with the disease now. Otherwise, we couldn't have acted so quickly." That's true. But how did this outbreak happen in Shudu? Xiao Tianya mused. The low ground along Donglong Street was indeed submerged in sewage. Someone was bound to fall ill eventually. But there were no homicide cases on Donglong Street, and no unburied corpses. I'll be honest, Supreme Commander, no offense, but venereal disease is the kind of infection one expects to find on Donglong Street. How did we end up with the Dancheng pox instead? The imperial physician tactfully found an excuse to head out. No one ever determined how the Dancheng pox spreads. Chen Yang thought for a moment, then continued. The collapse happened in heavy rain, and everyone was stuck in the water, so perhaps... There are plenty of infectious diseases, Xiao Tianya said. For example, that outbreak of rat plague in Luoxia Pass. There's no way Hezhou would have an outbreak of the same plague. Different regions have different climates and conditions. What applies to one won't apply to all. This humble servant is a paranoid man. An honest person oughtn't make unfounded insinuations. Even so, I suspect this disease didn't start on Donglong Street at all, but... Xiao Tianya jerked his thumb toward the roof. A silence fell over the rain shelter. Everyone had turned a little pale. Isn't it a coincidence? Xiao Tianya chuckled. The celestial being met with misfortune upon descent to the mortal world. It's virtually impossible to guard against something so unexpected. Like dodging a pit, only to fall into a well. The palace hasn't sent any word the past few days. Supreme Commander, the public ditch has been cleared, and the water level has fallen. So why do I feel this matter is just beginning? Those who live in the heavenly palace are immortals, Xiao Chia said slowly, and immortals value their lives. They wouldn't dare play with them this way. The possibility you speak of, only someone at the end of his rope, who had staked everything on one throw, would dare it. Are they suggesting someone purposely tried to spread a disease to kill the emperor? Or someone else? Or that they're poisoning someone? I'm a little unsure what is being implied. I don't know about that, Qiao Tianya said. The Directorate of Ceremonial Affairs currently lacks a leader who can take charge and control the eunuchs of the 24 Yemen. Much of the inner palace is in a state of unsupervised chaos. If someone wanted to bring in some, let's say, contamination, he could easily bluff his way through any closed doors. The embroidered uniform guard and Imperial Army guard the outside of the palace. There's nothing we can do about the inside. I feel we should take precautions. Why did Li Jianheng leave the palace? Was it really just to have fun? He had survived an assassination attempt mere weeks ago. He wasn't a courageous man. How would he dare sneak out on the sly? He wouldn't, unless someone put him up to it. Shi Hongxuan discussed all his pending plans with Shen Zichuan these days. He must have never expected to meet with misadventure on this outing. And now he was lying in his sickbed with his life hanging by a thread. So who convinced Li Jianheng to leave the safety of the palace and ensured Ohua Pavilion collapsed at exactly the right moment? Xiao Qiye contemplated the question in silence. Intuition told him it wasn't the Empress Dowager. Li Jianheng had just begun showing signs of filial respect toward her. This was precisely the moment for her to stage a comeback. She couldn't bear to let Li Jianheng die. Who else is there? This time, the intent wasn't to intimidate Li Jianheng, but to remove him from the board. But who would benefit from Li Jianheng's death? The curtain lifted once more. The imperial physician poked his head in and said joyfully, "Supreme Commander, the Lord Judge is awake." Xiao Qiye jumped to his feet, left the shelter behind, and strode into the temple room. Shen Zichuan, who had drifted in and out of consciousness for days, sat with his eyes half-lidded. Xiao Qiye crouched quietly at the side of the bed and gazed at him. Lifting a finger, Shen Zichuan weakly caressed Xiao Qiye's brows and eyes. Xiao Qiye grabbed his hand and pressed it to his cheek. "Go ahead and touch." Xiao Qiye leaned closer and laughed roughly. "I'll let you touch." That's the end of the chapter. Well, while we do have a tiny bit of time, that's all I'm reading for today. But that means we have time to talk about things. See, I was suspecting Shen Zichuan, especially because there's that one part where he hears about, Ohua Pavilion collapsing. And he had, he was expressionless. It mentioned his expressionless face. So it makes it seem kind of like, oh yeah, Shen Zichuan had something to do with this. But I am wondering if it's actually someone else. But notice how curious this is. Xiao Qiye is like, who else is there? And the narration is like, This time, the intent wasn't to intimidate Li Jianheng, but to remove him from the board. But who would benefit from Li Jianheng's death? And then immediately it's like, the curtain lifted once more. And then it's somebody telling him that Shen Zichuan is awake. So, is that not pointing to Shen Zichuan? And then we have to ask, like, okay, so what benefit does Shen Zichuan get from the Emperor dying? But, you know, we still don't know. Yeah, the disaster screwed him in his place, too, so that's weird. Like, he would have to be willing to do that to himself. So it is weird. It doesn't totally make sense, but you do wonder if he had some part in it, in some part of the plan, even if it was just like one piece and someone else is responsible for like another piece. Because I feel like that's kind of how a lot of things are going in this book. I really don't know. Elsie, you said, I need answers. The situation is driving me crazy. And I'm like, yeah. Exactly. And, Elsie, you also said, I'm wondering about the Shue something guy. Shue Shoujuo? Because he definitely is up to things. I don't know exactly what he's up to, but he could be up to things for sure. Yeah. I just want to mention that when we come back on Monday, which I'm so sad that we have to wait so long, as usual, but, when we come back on Monday, we'll be reading chapter 67, which is called Sharing a Pillow. Can someone remind me, was Sharing a Pillow already a chapter title in the first volume, or am I just imagining that? Because for some reason, Sharing a Pillow seems like an important phrase in this series. It's possible that I just was trying to do page math and I looked at the chapter title and I just remember it because of that, but for some reason it seems like really familiar. There was something. It was something that Xiao Chuye said. Okay, he said something to Shen Zichuan about them sharing a pillow in the first volume. Because I love that. But wasn't it linked to sharing clothes? I thought it was maybe to something to do with them, like, sleeping together, like, earlier on, when they were just, like, sleeping next to each other. Or the first time that they actually, like, slept in the bed together. I don't know. He was both flirting and trying to make Shen Zichuan be on his side. Well, that makes sense. Blue, I love where you said, I almost said Shue Zhengyang. Yeah. Okay, so it wasn't a chapter title, but it was a quote. They're bringing back a quote, so I'm glad I didn't just, like, hallucinate that. I love that. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I really like the chapter titles in this series because, you know, they're usually pretty short and they're pretty simple, but I feel like they carry so much meaning. We got so much sweetness today that I wasn't really expecting yet, like I said. But it makes sense in a way that, like, even if Shen Zichuan hadn't gotten sick, I feel like Xiao Chuye was already at the point of caring about him to this degree. But I feel like him becoming sick is like a thing that sort of, it's like, it allows Xiao Chuye as a character to, like, realize, like, how much Shen Zichuan means to him. I love things like that. Oh, Blue, you said it's from chapter 50. Oh, is that in this book? For some reason, I thought it was something in volume 1. Wait. Where? Yeah. Oh, did you know there's only a 2-word difference between sharing a boat on the same river and sharing a pillow on the same bed? I see. Thank you, Blue. Thank you for finding that. Anna, these are the favorite parts of this volume. Like this part where Xiao is taking care of Shen Zichuan. Because that definitely makes sense to me. It's very sweet. Um, and I just there was some page that like I keep reading things in this book and I'm like, oh my god, I'm gonna put that in the quotes later. Which I need to actually go and edit the quote thing again. It is overdue with more quotes from this book. But I mean, the where is Lanzhou thing, and then the thing where it talks about Shen Zichuan feeling like Xiao Qiye was like the Great Plain or like the open expanse or whatever, and just like everything about that. I mean, that's beautiful. Well, yeah, the quotes list will be so long by the end. I have a place where I have like kept track of different quotes, but for the video, like the little thing that I show on breaks, I basically like I erase some of the earlier ones so I can add newer ones, and it keeps evolving. And of course, it will get harder and harder to decide like what to erase. But somehow, somehow I have to do it. Otherwise, it would just be too long, and you wouldn't be able to like see a lot of them. So, yeah. I guess I'm gonna be adding to it like this weekend. Maybe I can just keep the quotes from the current volume. Yeah, I started doing it like this because when I was like, you know, when I start a volume, I don't have any quotes from that volume yet. So I was like, well, I need the ones from last time to show something. And then it'll be a little while before I have enough to kind of like fill it up. But I could just... I think at this point I would have enough. I could just make it volume 2. I don't know. Yeah, I think maybe like when we're like halfway through a volume or something like that, I guess it's like I can make that switch at that point. I haven't like updated the quote thing in a little while, but I'm gonna actually like reread like the past couple of streams and fill in the quotes and do all that over this weekend. And it'll be perfect because I'll be sitting there like missing this book, and it'll give me something to do and something to think about while I'm like waiting for Monday again. And that reminds me, yeah, this is the 6th stream. So next week, we finish the book. There's only 2 more streams of volume 2. We're already there. So that's exciting. So yeah, like I said, next Monday when we come back, we'll be on chapter 67, Sharing a Pillow. Yeah, the break is going to be difficult. That is true. But you know, that's just the way. See, on one hand, the break is going to be difficult taking a break from this book. On the other hand, I also didn't want to wait till I was finished with this series to start being on Ben. I really wanted to start Case File as soon as possible. So it's, you know, I think doing 4 volumes and then switching back and forth is like the best solution. But regardless, there's going to be a period of time of waiting and impatience and It will be terrible, but somehow we will survive. So yeah. I miss Brittany's streams right now too. Monday does feel so far away, but we'll get there. So I will see y'all on Monday. Thank you for coming to the stream. Bye.